Hey there everyone, in this video we are going to talk about how to make a simple bar graph in your experiment. So this is specifically for the design your own experiment project, but you can use these skills on anything, and we'll be using graphing skills throughout the year. So the first thing you do when you go to your design your own experiment data table is you need to click on the document. That's for our hour. This one is for second hour. And then you want to scroll through and try to find your name, because your name is going to allow you to have access to that sheet where you can type things in and you can analyze your own data. If at any time you get lost on what to do, read this first slide. It has instructions at the top, and it's got my example data for you to go through as well. But I am Miss Berg, so I'm going to try to find my name in order to make sure I'm showing you my example. So if I go to Berg's example, it has my name, which means I have the ability to type within the document. Now, something I've already done is go through and put in data for my experiment. In the other video, you can see why I picked these things, how I got these averages, but what I'm going to do in this video is just show you how to graph it. So the very first thing you want to do is select your data. So my data is going to be the New Balances all the way through Pumas, and then 36.1 all the way through 35.9. Now, one thing to keep in mind is for your column title, for your dependent variable, I have centimeters up there in parentheses. That implies that all of these boxes are measuring in centimeters. This is important because when you go to graph your data, you can't have any letters mixed in with your numbers if you want it to graph right. So first thing you should do is check your own data. If you have any letters with your numbers, it will not graph correctly. The type of shoe is different, this being nominal data. It can just be categories, but I have to have at least one thing that has numbers and only numbers. So the way that you select your data is you just click and hold down and drag your mouse across the cells that you want. Once you've selected your data, you're going to go up to Insert, and you're going to go all the way down where it says Insert Chart. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to insert my chart, and it's going to pop up with what it thinks I want. And in this case, it's wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and click through and try to change a bunch of stuff to make sure that it looks the way it's supposed to look. So first, in our chart editor, which should pop up for you on the right, I'm in the setup, which is exactly where I want to be to get started. A line chart is what it says for my chart type, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to click on line chart, and I'm going to scroll down until I find column. Now, I know I called this a bar graph, but we don't want a horizontal bar graph. We want vertical columns. So I'm going to click on column. And by clicking on that, it automatically puts in all the information that I want. It has my independent variables on the bottom, on the x-axis, which is exactly where I want it. And I have my y-axis is my dependent variable, but I can't tell it because it's not labeled. So now that I have everything in the appropriate place, I need to start going through and fine-tuning what exactly I'm looking at. And the way that I do that is I go back over to the right to the chart editor and I click on Customize. Once I'm in Customize, there's several things I can do. If you click on Chart Style, you can change your background color, you can change your border color. I'm not going to mess with those because I like it just plain and simple. You can maximize your data, which will zoom it in. I don't like this. To me, it looks scrunched and busy, and I'm not a fan. You can make a 3D column. What? That's right. It's a three-dimensional. So you can go ahead and click on that. It just makes it look kind of cool and pop out. And that's all I'm going to do in this section. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to my chart and axis titles because I need to actually change these. So I'm going to click on chart and axis title. I click on the arrow and it will expand. The first title I'm going to change is my chart title, because remember, your chart title should include your independent and dependent variable and be descriptive. So I'm going to erase what it thinks I want, and I'm going to use the same title as I did for my data table, where I'm explaining the effect of the type of shoe on Miss Berg's jumping height. The whole goal of a title is it should summarize what exactly the data is representing. So you can see at the top of my chart now it says the effect of the type of shoe on Mr. Berg's jumping height. That's great. It has my independent variable, which is my type of shoe, and my dependent variable, which is my jumping height. So I have my chart title, but you can see I'm still missing my axis titles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this chart title. I'm going to hit the arrow that's pointing down, and I'm going to add some more titles. I'm going to start with my horizontal axis. Remember, horizontal is going across the bottom, kind of like the horizon. And it says type of shoe, which is exactly what I want it to say. But one thing I've noticed about Google Sheets is sometimes it looks like it should be there, but it's not actually showing up on the chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight, and I'm actually going to retype this, and it should pop up for me. So type of shoe, and there we go. It pops up on the chart. I don't know why it doesn't the first time. As you're doing this, there are a couple things you can do. You can change your title text color. Right now it's automatically black, but say you wanted to make it teal, you could go teal. You can make it bold. You can make it italicized. I'm going to leave mine black just because I think it looks good with this style that we have going here, but you can change that. Just make sure it's not offensive to the eye. And if you want to bold and italicize it, I think that looks sharper and it really stands out against the column titles. So it's a quick recommendation. So I have my type of shoe, which is my independent variable on the horizontal axis. Now I'm going to change my vertical axis title. And again, it has exactly what I want, but it's not popping up in the actual graph, which means I just get to type it again. So I'm going to erase it out, and I'm going to say average jumping height, and then really important, you want to include those units. I'm measuring it in centimeters, which is why it's at the end and in parentheses. That tells my audience or anybody who's reading this graph that these numbers represent average jumping height, and we're not measuring in inches, we're not measuring in meters, we're measuring in centimeters. And just like last time, I'm going to bold and italicize this just to make it look pretty sharp. Yeah, pretty darn sharp. All right, once you're done with those titles, we don't need to do anything with this series. We don't need to create a legend for this because we're just comparing types of shoe with average jumping height. Later this year, we're going to play with that a little bit more. My horizontal axis looks pretty darn good, but I am going to click on my vertical axis. So my vertical axis, I'm going to show the axis line so that we have this reference point, and this is different than that. I'm a big fan of the axis line. Here's the big thing that we're going to play with this entire year every time we have data. So the big thing about interpreting data is you want to look at the scale on that vertical axis, that y-axis. And right now, all of my shoe brands, they look pretty darn similar, which just tells me that there's not a huge difference between any of them. You can change your minimum and maximum range. So say I know it never goes below 30 and never goes above 40. So if I put 30 as my minimum value and 40 as my maximum value, now I can see a little bit the difference between each column, which is pretty helpful in this particular experiment, but it's not always necessary. And one thing to keep in mind when you're interpreting results is if I'm interpreting these results and I say the Jordans were way better than the other brands, like it's just not accurate. It was very close to Nike's and New Balance and Adidas and Pumas. Ultimately, my shoes don't make a huge difference. But when it comes to making a conclusion for this particular experiment, we can say that Jordans did help me jump the highest, but not significantly more so than any other shoe. So it's just something to consider when you're interpreting your data. If you want to decrease that range, that's fine. But then in your conclusion, you should state that there's not a huge difference between all of the results, because that's a reality for this particular experiment. And that's it. We did it. That's what the graph should look like. Hopefully at this point you have a beautiful bar graph. If it didn't work out for you, let me know. But good luck. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for stopping in. Bye-bye.